Thank you all for coming in this afternoon. I want to welcome everyone to celebrate the 90 years of James Ball. My name is Matthew. I'm the youngest son of Jim. Today we will share memories of my father. We will laugh at his foibles, we'll celebrate his success, and mourn that we will not have the opportunity to create more memories. On behalf of my mother Helen, my siblings and their partners, Jeff, Robin, Warren, Joy, Kathy and Kylie, Jim's grandchildren and their partners, Josh, Andrea, Erin, Dave, Cam, Georgia, Lockie, Claire and Jasmine, and Jim's great-grandchildren, Harvey, Mio and Sophie, I thank you all for being here, not just to share memories, but to support us in our grief and to give us a physical representation of the affection and respect achieved by Jim. Thank you to the family and friends that have had to make difficult arrangements or have travelled long distances to be here. I would also like to welcome the families and friends streaming today from their homes in Australia and overseas. I'll just ask if everyone could just take a moment to check that their phones are switched on to silent or switched off. Today's proceedings will include a eulogy of Dad's life from Jeff, with added colour from Warren, Kathy via Lockie, and from Jazz. After the eulogy, we will experience Jim's life through images and music. Andrea, Josh and Erin will also play a live piece of music that we feel captures Dad. I'll then be back and I'll share a few closing words, then we'll ask you all to stay for refreshments and to share those memories with us. During today's commemoration, please feel free to laugh, to call out, to shed a tear and to clap. We're going to get started now. I'd like to welcome my brother Jeff.
Thanks, Matt. In the immortal words of Neil Diamond on that hot August night in 1972, let me do a love song for you. Oh, you should have seen Kathy's face. She thought I was actually going to sing. Once upon a time, somewhere along the far eastern Victoria coast, young Jimmy was woken by the sound of the screen door creaking open. In less time than it took for the door to bang closed, Jimmy was on his feet and moving. The simple fibro shack had only 2 rooms, one being the master bedroom belonging to Uncle Jim and Auntie Joyce, and the other containing everything else: kitchen sink, bench, table, couch, and folding beds for young Jimmy and his sister Judy. The room was still dark, but Jimmy could see a strange orange glow coming through the open door. He carefully skirted the couch and he joined his Uncle Jim on the veranda. Jim was facing the red sunrise and scowling with his hands on his hips. Young Jimmy stood beside him, scowling with his hands on his hips. Jimmy would turn 12 in February. He was well schooled in Cape Conran weather law. Red sky in the morning, sailor take warning. They hadn't fished for 8 days, an eternity, and they wouldn't be fishing today either. Then, to Jimmy's surprise, Uncle Jim grunted and said, "If you want to come, I'll meet you at Ike in 10 minutes. Bang on old Tom's door, will you?" Ike was Jim's bigger boat. Tom was one of Uncle Jim's fishing mates. Young Jimmy knew from past experience that Uncle Jim wouldn't wait if he was late, and so he was still pulling his knitted fishing jumper over his head as he ran to Tom's shack. Tom wasn't impressed. "You're blurry joking. That Nixon's a mad bugger," he mumbled to himself as he stepped off his own veranda, with Jimmy wondering if old Tom might have actually slept in his fishing clothes as the old man shrugged into his oilskin. And so, whilst all the other men, in anticipation of a storm, were hauling their heavy boats up the beach, Jimmy was jumping over the seats to sit in Ike's bow as Tom pushed off and Uncle Jim bent his back to the long oars. After 30 minutes of hard rowing through breaking waves, Uncle Jim shipped the oars and Jimmy stopped bailing. Tom had the lines baited, 5 of them, 1 for Jimmy and 2 each for the men. They were fishing for craybait. 2 days earlier, Uncle Jim had declared an emergency. With no craybait, they couldn't catch any crays in the cray pots. And if they didn't catch at least a dozen crays before New Year's Eve, there would be a bloody uprising amongst the Cape Conran mob. So there they were, an hour later, and barely a half dozen fish between them. "This is bloody useless, Jim," with water from the wave that had just broken over the side pouring down the front of his oilskin coat. "I've used more lead than Ned Kelly, and I still can't keep the blurry sinker on the bottom." "Just a few more minutes," Uncle Jim muttered. 2 more fish. Young Jimmy was in... It's always 2 more fish. Young Jimmy was in silent agreement with Tom at this stage, but he would never admit it to Uncle Jim. And at that moment, Uncle Jim gave a sudden tug, stood up and started hauling in his fish. But before he had it in the boat, the strange, muted sunlight darkened even further. All 3 turned to look out to sea, and to young Jimmy's dismay, his entire field of view was filled with water. Tom later informed the drinkers gathered on Prez and Laura's veranda that the wave was bigger than the wall of a blurry house. Uncle Jim sat down abruptly, so young Jimmy knew they were in trouble. But miraculously, Ike lifted up the side of the wave, passed over the top and down the other side. As they watched the rogue wave roll away toward the shore, Uncle Jim finished pulling in his fish and said, "That'll probably do us today." Young Jimmy was born James Bryant Ball on the 11th of February in 1935 to Edith and Archie Ball, their first child. Jim's sister Judith was born 3 years later. Jim grew up at number 8 Crown Avenue, Camberwell, a house largely built by his father Archie. Gramps was a handyman plumber who could turn his hand to almost any building or mechanical task. His large garage workshop was a technically minded child's delight and certainly encouraged Jim's gift for mechanical design and building. Jim attended Camberwell South Primary School and Camberwell High School. Judging by his nature and life trajectory, we can imagine that he was a good student, attentive, inquisitive, imaginative, neat, with perhaps the annoying habit of arriving late for school in the morning, out of breath from riding hard, and all the while blaming the train crossing at Riversdale Road for his misfortune. Arriving late would prove to be a lifelong idiosyncratic misfortune, an idiosyncrasy for Jim and a misfortune for the rest of us. It's vodka. We might also judge that Jim was probably a bit of an all-rounder. An aptitude for maths and science led him to engineering. An aptitude for art led him to drafting, sketching and painting. An aptitude for spelling and grammar led him to correct his wife, grandchildren and children endlessly, right to the very end. Didn't he, Lockie? It was about a week ago, we were eating a meal and Dad was struggling to eat at the time, but actually managed to eat a scallop dumpling. And Lockie said, "Oh, it went down easy." And Dad said, "Easily." Once upon a time, on a sandy track between Marlow and Cape Conran, an old truck rattled and banged as Uncle Jim navigated the deep ruts and hollows. They passed young Jimmy's favourite sign, which read, "Sharks are dangerous, snakes are dangerous, so is this bloody road." It had rained the night before, which often made the track impassable. Young Jimmy was loving the adventure. In the absence of seatbelts, he had his bare feet propped against the steel dashboard, one hand gripping the passenger door handle, the other waving about in excitement. The truck bounced into a dip filled with water and Uncle Jim gummed the engine to carry them through, with young Jimmy cheering and laughing. They emerged from the dip with water spraying out to the side like a wave, and the truck began labouring up the steep rise. As they neared the crest, a wood pigeon was startled from the brush, and is so often their habit, it continued to fly ahead of the truck down the track. "Grab the wheel, Jimmy," Uncle Jim demanded, as he reached behind the seat and produced his shotgun. He proceeded to lean his right arm, shotgun and head out of the window. Then he gave the accelerator a bit more toe to catch up with the bird. As far as Jimmy was concerned, he couldn't see the road at all. It was below the hood. So he just followed the bird until BAM! And the pigeon vanished. Uncle Jim stood on the brakes and the truck slewed to a halt. "That's dinner bought and paid for," Uncle Jim muttered, grinning as he jumped down from the cab before the local dingoes got any bright ideas. At this case, in case you're not familiar with Uncle Jim Nixon, I suppose I should explain, Jim Nixon was an Orbost farmer. His wife Joyce was Dad's much older cousin. Jim Nixon, along with his brothers and 11 other families, had permissive occupancies at Cape Conran. For myself, Warren, Kathy and Matt, and I think also maybe Josh and some of the grandchildren, Dad's stories of Conran and Uncle Jim were the adventure tales of our childhood, more vivid and exciting than any comic or book. So you'll forgive me if they pop up here and there. Where was I? The Bull family attended Camberwell South Methodist Church, which formed the social foundation and probably the moral foundation for Jim's life. The young adults group boasted in excess of 70 members, and Dad and later Mum formed lifelong friendships with perhaps a dozen other couples. Known to us as the church group, they were adopted as aunties and uncles. Belonging with and being committed to a group of trusted friends is the foundation of a stable life. Help in times of need, company in grief, companions in celebrations. I imagine this is where Dad learnt the practice of volunteering and working together to make a difference in your community, and the indispensable and sacrificial nature of leadership. Some of the organisations Dad participated in as secretary, president or worshipful master include the Junior Chamber of Commerce, Rostrum, Masonic Lodge, school councils, Lions, the Crib Point Railway Save Our Train Association, and more recently Probus. Stan Grant, in an article in the Saturday paper, said, "We should not reach for leadership, leadership should reach for us. We should not seek glory in leadership, but rather humility. Leadership should not embrace the office bearer, but instead the people the leaders serve." I think Dad embodied that philosophy. I can remember endless working bees, community construction weekends, lodge Christmas parties at the farm in Somerville, printing newsletters on a Roneo printer, which is a lot of blank faces, but some of you might remember a Roneo printer. It's a type of hand-cranked ink duplicator. It's actually a marvel of mechanical mechanisms. Not an electric cable inside. And envelope stuffing. And later, fundraising such as the Lions Caravan sausage sizzles. But I get ahead of myself. Jim left high school at around 16 and began working at Vickers Ruolt as a trainee draftsman. Ruolt's was a heavy engineering company in Richmond at a time when Australia had such things. Whilst working, he attended night school at Swinburne until he received his diploma of mechanical engineering. Back in the day before Tinder, a young draftsman with good prospects might reasonably be found making excuse to visit the company typing pool. It's an evocative name, pool, isn't it? Typing pool. Where, as luck would have it, Helen might reasonably be found typing. Romance ensued until Romance Interruptus, otherwise known as National Service, which imposed a 6-month speed bump. But as you've no doubt anticipated, Jim and Helen married. And it was on the 28th of February in 1959. This year, Mum and Dad celebrated their 66th wedding anniversary. A remarkable feat of tolerance on Mum's part, and duly recognised as such by a letter from the Queen on the occasion of their 60th, and then by the King on the occasion of their 65th. Dad prided himself on his dancing prowess. Not the stiffly formal sort you see on Dancing with the Stars, but a lovely free-flowing foxtrot that lent itself to creativity and, let's be honest, showing off. Of course, in the time-honoured tradition, Mum did whatever Dad did, but backwards and in heels. In my memory, Dad and Mum were almost always first on the floor, and as kids we loved to watch them swirl and glide, using the entire platform if they had the floor to themselves, or moving effortlessly through other dancers when things got crowded. Naturally enough, Dad was in high demand among their female friends, increasingly so in later years as the gender balance shifted in favour of women. Mum's rule was that she was always first and last. Coincidentally, Dad's last full evening of dancing was actually in this very place. Grey Goose. Dad designed their first home with some wonderful postmodern features, including a flat roof and, for example, a large fish tank that was built into the stone shelf that abutted the stone fireplace. Gramps and Dad built the house. I think I've already established Dad's idiosyncrasy, and so true to form, let's just say the newlyweds' first few months in their new home were accompanied by Gramps, laying tiles, completing stonework and so forth. In 1959, Jubilee Street, Mount Waverley, was a gravel road on the fringe of the suburban sprawl. Dad and Mum weren't alone in their pioneering spirit, and the freshly married Leonie and Arthur Mitchell moved into their brand new home right next door within weeks. I shouldn't have looked at you, Leonie. Before long, a gate was cut into the paling fence, suggesting a new adage, good gates make great neighbours. Another precious auntie and uncle to be added to the Ball children's abundance. Speaking of Ball children, I arrived in 61, Warren in 64, Kathy in 68 and Matthew in 72. As was common for the time, Dad was somewhat removed from the business of child rearing. Apart from the hugely exciting occasional Conran stories, my abiding memory is of Dad going out to meetings after dinner, invariably running late. It can't have been every night, but it felt like it to a little boy longing for a story. For Dad, weekends were generally filled with one project or another, and I don't remember a lot of fun and games, except for holidays, especially endless summers at Macrae, which we shared with many of you here today. Dad made our paddleboard in secret, including the paddle and wheels that converted the board into a handy trolley. He also built the Moppet, our first yacht. A year or two apart, the paddleboard and then the Moppet appeared as if by glorious magic in the lounge room at Macrae on Christmas morning. The Moppet fully rigged with sails. There was never a more wondrous reveal. The purchase of the boat shed for the extravagant sum of $1,500 in 1972 may have been the single most awesome investment that Dad and Mum ever made. Let me tell you, or indeed remind you, of just one memory, the boat-mounted water slide. We had a wonderful fishing boat built by Gramps and Dad called the Jewellen. It was a conflation of Dad's sister Judy and Helen. The older I get, the more I grieve for that old boat. There was something quintessentially Gramps and Dad about it. Anyhow, Dad got the idea that he could mount a ladder from the bow of the boat down into the water, and then in the boat, a ladder going up a couple of metres, and then a slide going down and out the back of the boat. I suppose Dad imagined that he could just anchor the boat off the beach and the extended family of adopted church cousins and actual cousins could have endless fun sliding and swimming and sliding while the adults got oiled up and worked on their tans. As it turned out, the queue of kids waiting in line for a turn stretched 100 metres or more along the beach. Not a parent in sight. And Dad and a couple of other uncles would spend hours standing in the water, holding the boat, splashing water onto the hot metal surface, and barely containing the chaos. More innocent times before public liability was invented. Dad's work was always a high priority, and he was well respected for his knowledge, creativity, discipline, and integrity. Whilst at Ruwalt's, he designed a roll-forming machine for making roofing panels, such as Cliplock. He transferred to Brownbelt to continue this specialty, and for a period of time, all the projects around the house seemed to consist of roll-formed panels. In 1973, he took a job with Stevenson and Darragh, a small engineering company that made brick processing equipment and conveyor belts. They were in the process of moving their factory to Tyab, and Dad saw this as a wonderful opportunity to buy a few acres and introduce his children to the joys of a small farm. Mud in winter, scorched earth in summer, fox massacred chickens, fly-blown sheep and carting hay in 40-degree heat on New Year's Day. But of course, farm life isn't always as rosy as that. To Dad's delight, the farm at Somerville had an amazing 5-bay shed with a built-in workshop, plus a hay shed. The opportunity for hoarding building materials, old screws, bearings, pipe and fittings and bent nails expanded exponentially. Almost 20 years later, when Mum and Dad sold the farm, we needed to sequester Dad in a padded room while we loaded the accumulation of 20 years of dubiously useful pieces of wood and metal into a genuinely useful skip. I'm going to hand over to Warren for some added colour.
Just before I insert my memories into Jeff's storytelling, I'd just like to openly express my gratitude to my siblings and Mum and the extended family for all the care and love that they gave Dad in my absence over the past few weeks. They've done all the heavy lifting in that role of keeping Dad comfortable. Joy and I have been making our way around the country with the van, and we were way up the north coast of Western Australia when we received the news of Dad's passing. As difficult as this was, I know that he would have been happy for us to be there and not here, because it's what he loved doing also. He and Mum had travelled the exact same route pretty much many years before, and often spoke of the highlights. Now, to interject into Jeff's story with some thoughts of my own. For my part, I'd just like to speak of my memories of Dad throughout our childhood and youth, because that's what I've reflected on the most over the last few weeks. I've come to realise the impression and influence that he had on me, and no doubt my siblings, during that period. And the period basically lands within our years at Somerville, as Jeff had just broken into. We'll probably double up on some memories, but I'm sure you won't mind. Lessons learned. The farm taught us a menagerie of life lessons, mostly due to Dad's desire to have a menagerie of farm animals. We learned how to hand rear calves, sheep, chooks, ducks, pony, even a couple of goats, and pretty much all at once. Dad went out and bought an old tractor to enable the paddocks to be harrowed and slashed and maintained. It was used to put feed out in the winter, etc. With Dad working late hours, these jobs became our jobs. So he taught us how to drive the tractor, our first introduction to being in charge of a motor vehicle at a very young age. I'm tipping probably 10 or 11, I'm not too sure. We followed up years later with paddock bombs and motorbikes, but that's a different story. He taught us how to start the tractor using the crank handle, which was pretty, our kids wouldn't have a clue what a crank handle is, but that was the battery was inevitably flat, so the crank handle was very handy. From him we learned the intricacies of farming and of farm equipment, and we became experts at reversing a trailer and doing quick repairs on the run, and the art of improvisation. We even had air rifles when we reached the right age, and we learned firearm safety. We learned quite quickly the trials and tribulations of looking after farm animals. This meant many chores after school, which we all had active roles in. We learned the hardest of all lessons, carting and stacking hay bales, as Jeff mentioned. Restocking the hay shed was an annual summer chore that I've tried to erase from my memory. It did, however, teach us, as only farms can, resilience. Dad was known to get angry, but his demeanour was generally calm and considered during a crisis. But some of the crazy animals on the farm certainly tested his limit. As Jeff has mentioned, Dad was an engineer. His dad was a plumber come jack of all trades. And as a result, we had all sorts of tools and machinery and shed space at our disposal. Dad lived by the rule, don't buy it if you can build it, and don't replace it if you can fix it. He encouraged us to do the same, and as my family can attest, I really jumped on this one. It's one of my favourite rules. As a kid, I spent many hours down in the shed building stuff and learning how to use all of the tools. When Jeff and I respectively turned 18 and bought our first cars, unfortunately for Dad, we both chose cars that needed fixing. In both cases, Dad was on duty to oversee and guide us as motors were removed and stripped down and rebuilt. Whenever Dad started a project out in the shed, the actual building of it would be preceded by sketches, notes, dimensions, and a material list. I do this to this day. So many of his ways and his passions and his loves have been passed down to us. When I think about my favourite passions, I link them to Dad. My love of snow sports and water sports, sailing, camping, and now caravanning. So now that he's no longer with us, and the memories are what we're left with, I'm able to clearly see the wonderful impact that he had on me and how it helped shape my future self. Thanks, Dad.
Back to Dad's career at Stevenson and Darra. Thanks, Wazza. They were known as Steadar. So Dad was promoted from engineering to managing the conveyor side of the business. Predictably, for a period, most of our home projects included conveyor belt as floor covering, shelf covering, or weather protection. Essentially, the business manufactured made-to-size specialty conveyor belts and shipped them all over Australia. Although Dad had a gift for leadership, it isn't the same thing as management, and I don't suppose that he was enjoying the challenge at all. On one occasion, a particularly ungifted employee shipped a belt to Western Australia instead of South Australia. Dad's head exploded when the gentleman insisted it wasn't really a big mistake. After all, he only got one letter wrong. There's one more Conran story, this time a memory of mine. Dad straddled the centre seat in the battered aluminium fishing boat and breathed in the warm, salty, fishy air as the boat seemed to slide across the glassy river surface. The past year of work had been an uphill slog with few rewards, and this brief summer escape to Conran was a very welcome respite. The wide, light boat with the large outboard was a far cry from the clinker boats of Dad's childhood. Dad turned and smiled at the older man with his hand resting lazily on the outboard. He was essentially unchanged. Uncle Jim displayed the same movie star grin, teeth glowing white in contrast with the sun-brown weathered face. His short curly hair was now gunmetal grey, but his eyes still sparkled with some secret mischief. Dad glanced toward the bow at the two nut-brown boys standing there side by side, gripping the anchor rope as if they were water skiing, each one with an arm in the air. We were on the Broadrib River, but Uncle Jim had told us that we were going to the river of no return. The Broadrib was a comfortable width, with the banks heavily wooded with saltbush and mangroves. As we rounded a wide bend, Uncle Jim unexpectedly turned the boat, without slowing, directly towards the bank. Warren and I looked around in concern, but all Uncle Jim said was, "Duck." As he and Dad squatted into the floor of the boat, wide-eyed, Warren and I dropped like cut puppets and braced for impact as the boat swerved hard. Branches brushed the sides and gunnels as the boat shot through into a narrow, winding tunnel. There, branches met overhead and dappled lights sparkled here and there on the water. Uncle Jim swooshed through the chicanes, causing great excitement in the bow before throttling back and easing to a slow drift. Dad smiled and passed us boys fishing reels, knowing that we were creating memories in common, generational memories, hey do you remember whens, that will continue to be shared even when he was gone. Steadar had a period of difficulty in the downturn of the mid-70s, and Dad was out of work with 6% of Australians. Dad hated being out of work, and I remember being quite anxious about what might happen to us. But I don't have any recollection of actually going without anything. And in fact, I don't think it was for that long. In any case, Dad got work as a travelling technical sales rep for a filtration company. Dad was not a natural salesman. It was not at all. And when a project manager position came up at the SEC, he jumped at it. Working out of Monash House in the city required travelling from Somerville to the city by train, adding at least 3 hours to each working day. But I believe Dad was much more engaged with this work and very proud of the massive scale of some of the engineering projects he managed. Kathy's written her memories and very successfully prevailed upon Lockie to read them for us. Thanks.
Alright, let's see how I go. Grandpa was a master of speeches, and I'm sure everyone here would have heard at least one of them. He passed that tone on to all of us, but Mum says today just isn't the day she feels she can show it off. She has so many memories of the farm, swimming in the dam and squealing for help as Grandpa rushed to save her from the leeches that always seemed to find her. Driving the tractor after a quick crash course from him during hay bale season, and not so great memories of the chickens hanging headless from their claws on the monkey bars. She remembers visiting Kawa most Easters, even when it was suggested she shouldn't go. She insisted on joining the fox and rabbit hunting with the other kids, only to end up in Grandpa's arms in front of the ute crying, while the others sat on the tray. She remembers Grandpa's shed, how he could fix absolutely anything. The walls lined with traditional hand tools, each one hanging in its exact place. Outlines for every tool, so if one was missing, he knew. And didn't they all hear about it when Jeff forgot to put something back? But when Mum says he could fix anything, she really means anything. Broken crockery, toasters, cars, tractors, and even water pumps for their tanks. As a little girl, she'd stand on the back of his chair and comb his hair. He taught her to ride her bike, and she's sure he was the one that put it together on Christmas Eve. She remembers family holidays in the maroon station wagon. Grandpa had this incredible ability to pack everything in just right. A skill, she says, he definitely passed on to her. She recalls being on an orientation camping weekend with Grandma, and she thought they were lost. She kept saying, "Dad will find us," and sure enough, he did. Her love for bush camping and hiking definitely came from Grandpa and not from Grandma. There were moments where he had to rescue her after she climbed too high and her fear of heights kicked in. She'd always forget that he shared the same fear. But he never hesitated to come help her down. Then there were the boat shed memories. Sailing with Grandpa, him teaching her to sail and row in the little boat that he made, the Moppet. Fishing, he'd bait her hook, take the fish off, and before long, she'd taken over his line too. I wonder why she always caught the most. He taught her to water ski, kneeboard, aquaplane, anything on the water, except swim. Grandpa wasn't the best swimmer, but every summer at Macrae, he had his signature entrance, starting at the boat shed, running down and stumbling into the water. He'd dive under and disappear for what felt like forever. To Mum as a child, it was like he became a stingray, gliding silently along the bottom. He could hold his breath for so long. She also remembers the metal slide off the back of the boat, one of her angry memories. It was such a hit, every kid down the beach wanted a turn, and they only ever got one each. He was there for her graduation, to walk her down the aisle, and most precious, he was in the room when I was born, so obviously. He held her hand, and his voice was the only one she could focus on. After I was placed on her chest, Grandpa had the first hold. Neil Diamond was playing, music she'd grown up with on Grandpa's old Tandberg. At any event with music, Grandpa couldn't sit still. He had to dance. Grandma first, then Mum. He didn't teach her to dance though, he just led her, with his own unique style, gliding across the floor, dodging everyone as they went. She says she can still feel his hand on her back, guiding her with that firm, familiar touch. They went on so many skiing trips, and of course, it was Grandpa who taught her how to ski, how to use the toes, and how to fall with just that little bit of style. In more recent years, they shared amazing trips together. A cruise with me and Mum, Vietnam for her 50th, with Mum and I. Sorry, Grandpa. Vietnam for her 50th, and the trip when she left early. all the Probus adventures in the last 6 years, and South Australia for 6 weeks, where, of course, Grandpa was very impressed with her car packing skills. Looking through his photos over the past few weeks, Mum's been struck by how many places they both visited across Australia and overseas. And the lovely thing is that she recognises so many of the Australian spots because she's been there too. When she was planning trips, Grandpa would always talk about where they'd been and where she should go next. We loved having Grandma and Grandpa visit every year to Airlie Beach, coming to see my school events and looking after me when Mum went on her trips and didn't want a little brat overseas. Grandpa and Mum scuba dived together, went sailing, stayed on island resorts, and had many fun adventures. At Christmas, we'd start the holiday in the city apartment, doing all the Christmas activities, seeing the Maya windows, and then head down to Macrae. We'd watch the carols by candlelight together on Christmas Eve, and Grandpa Santa would be the one putting my toys together for Christmas morning. Mum thinks we spent nearly every Christmas morning together when I was little. We miss him deeply, but we're so grateful for everything he gave, the love, the lessons, the laughter, and the legacy.
Thanks, Lord. And so the years roll by, marked by the annual peeling of skin. Children become young adults, romance blossoms, families expand and interweaves with other families. Dad and Mum always welcomed these new extensions to the family, enjoying social occasions and the joy of engagements, marriages, first homes, births, new jobs and personal achievements, being alongside her on the phone in times of trouble and grief. Dad took the opportunity of early retirement from the SEC at age 55, and then after a break of just a few months, accepted a role with Transfield, writing technical documents for coal conveyor systems. At around this time, Mum and Dad decided to sell the farm in Somerville and buy an apartment in South Melbourne. They enjoyed a couple of years of their new urban lifestyle before Dad agreed to take a commissioning leadership role on a conveyor system in Taiwan. And thus a new adventure. Dad and Mum spent 8 years overseas in Taiwan, Thailand, and finally China before he re-retired at age 67. As is the way of engineering projects, they inevitably run longer than anticipated, and I don't think Mum ever expected to be away from home for so long. But they had some amazing experiences and, as usual, formed strong friendships. Not all their experiences were welcome. On one occasion in Thailand, Dad was invited to enjoy the view from the top edge of the open cut, whilst the mine executive emphasised the health benefits for Dad of completing the project more quickly than Dad was planning. Jazzy's going to share some memories on behalf of the grandchildren.
Vertically challenged. I definitely feel the pressure of being on behalf of all the grandchildren, so hopefully I say this okay for their benefit. I think we can all agree that we've been so lucky to have had Jim for as many years as we've had. Grandpa instilled many lessons onto us grandkids, and he was likely the reason I pursued editing, and was also probably the first grammar police I've ever known. Grandpa had a skill to speedily pinpoint and correct us on grammar and pronunciation, and he is the reason I will now forever hesitate using the word cookie as I hear his voice in my head saying, "No, it's called a biscuit." He was adamant about that. Grandpa's other incredible talent was his art. He will always be the artist I could only ever aspire to be. He had an incredible talent rare few possess. One of his watercolour paintings from his time in China hangs on the wall above my desk. I look at it every day when I'm searching for inspiration. Grandpa always made time for us grandkids, probably because he was well into retirement by that age, greeting us in his best outfits with a huge smile and an abundance of cuddles and kisses. Even during COVID, we would receive surprise and completely accidental FaceTime group calls. One of the few planned group FaceTime calls was for a painting session altogether. We each followed a Bob Ross painting tutorial to create a beautiful sunset landscape. Of course, Grandpa's was amazing and he beat us all. It was tough to beat him in general. Growing up, Grandpa took Cameron, Lockie and I on a road trip to Phillip Island. Most of us here today may know what a menace Grandpa could be when driving. During the car ride, I will forever remember the time Grandpa absolutely floored it getting over a speed bump. And when I tell you I've never gotten so much airtime in a car, I mean it. We were flying for 30 seconds straight before crashing down. Us grandkids let out a cheer like we were on a roller coaster. And then the next few speed bumps after that were at an appropriate speed. Grandpa wasn't fond of American traditions, but when he learnt how much I loved the idea of Halloween, he put everything aside to help me. Most years he would carve a pumpkin with me and he nailed it every time. One year I had a Halloween party and I baked up some gory goodies. Grandpa jumped on board with that. I had biscuits that looked like witches' fingers, and he helped to equip them with nails and blood details that looked so realistic that people were hesitant to eat them. It didn't matter because the act of doing them with Grandpa brought me more joy than anything else would have. I will miss Grandpa's beautiful smile, the way his eyes lit up when he saw you, and the cuddles he would give that felt like the best hug in the world. He was the most amazing grandpa, and I am forever grateful to have had him in my life, as I'm sure all of us here today are. Thank you.
Thanks, Jazz. Dad and Mum always enjoyed travel. Possibly the one thing Dad enjoyed more than travel was planning travel. They joined the Grey Nomad Trail and practically circumnavigated Australia. Unlike most nomads, Dad and Mum rarely came to grief over caravan reversing. Dad was an extraordinary reverser, setting an aspirational high bar for his children, who are all extraordinary as well. That's a stupid little joke, isn't it? On occasion, Dad would be recruited to back in the caravan of other less gifted nomads, thereby saving many marriages. Naturally, Dad and Mum did not restrict themselves to domestic adventures. Their first international trip was to Hong Kong with Uncle John and Auntie Chris in the mid-70s, another pair of adopted relatives. And since then, they've visited more countries than Ferdinand Magellan. Dad's last cruise was just last year to Singapore and Vietnam. Dad had a habit, whilst torturing us with endless video footage of Roman ruins and Gothic cathedrals, of narrating what was happening on the screen, only for seconds later on the video, his voice on the video saying exactly the same thing. During a trip to Ireland, whilst driving into a village, Dad noticed a sign to the side of the road that said, "Prepare to wave." Whilst Dad was busy wondering if wave was some Irish term for give way, they rounded the next corner and there, seated on a folding chair under the shelter of his wee garage, was your man, smiling and waving. In 2016, Mum had one of her rare visits to hospital, and Dad was under strict instructions to look after domestic chores so that Mum could stay off her feet for a few weeks. Cooking, cleaning and so forth, all these things which he was quite capable of, but normally much too busy with important stuff. On about day 2 of Mum's recovery, we find Jimmy engaged in the evocatively euphemistic endeavour of standing on the bed and shaking his doona. Sadly, the comic potential of the act did not save him this time, and he fell and struck his head, leading to a small internal bleed. Ambulance and medical drama followed. Unfortunately, Dad was never quite the same afterwards. It was much as if he'd had a minor stroke, which in fact he may have. He was left less physically and mentally nimble. We might say his condition tapped the brakes and loosened the steering, but it certainly didn't put him up on chocks. Interestingly, it also seemed to us that Dad adopted a more tolerant outlook. For most of his life, Dad hated discomfort. He was easily frustrated, mainly by other people, usually his children, but sometimes by his own limitations. Like many men of his era, he was quite reserved when it came to expressing emotions other than annoyance. Over the last few years, his emotions bubbled up easily, like when describing a sunset or talking about a grandchild. He would, frustratingly for us, he'd start to get teary and mumble, but to our great surprise, he also developed the habit of laughing at himself. When, for example, if whilst walking he veered off the path, or while standing up he overbalanced and was caught by someone, he would laugh, even sometimes when he wasn't caught. Only a month ago, Mum asked me to come down and Dad sit whilst she and Kathy attended a girls' lunch. I use the term girls. No problem. So at the pre-arranged time, Auntie Pat, who's here, another adopted auntie, arrived to pick up Mum and Dad. Dad, meanwhile, was keen to get up and cop a cuddle. And so I had him safely standing in his walker when I turned my back to hold open the door. Then out of the corner of my eye, the Leaning Tower of Pisa begins to topple. He'd stopped, he'd let go of the handles to hoist up his trousers. Here we go, I thought. Mum's first outing for months and he's gone and broken his bloody hip. But thankfully, no. He went down slowly and just laughed as we went through the process of heaving him up. I think we can all agree Dad's life was a life well lived. But you know, he would have preferred a few more years, a few more cuddles, a few more visits to the boat shed. We never heard him say, "I've had enough, it's time for me to go." When his doctor visited last week, Dad didn't recognise him at first, and when Mum told him who it was, he said, "Is it that bad?" Some level of dissatisfaction with one's situation might be an essential aspect of being an engineer. Dad was always seeing an opportunity to adjust his surroundings, and as a result, he had a positive impact on those around him, even a whole beach of kids. But perhaps in these last few months, Dad experienced our love, not for what he did, but simply for who he was. Thank you.
We're going to visit Dad's memories or have memories of Dad through some images and some music now.
I see trees of green, red roses too. I see them bloom for me and you. And I think to myself, what a wonderful world. I see skies of blue and clouds of white, the bright blessed day, the dark sacred night. And I think to myself, what a wonderful world. The colors of the rainbow, so pretty in the sky, are also on the faces of people going by. I see friends shaking hands, saying, "How do you do?" They're really saying, "I love you." I hear babies cry, I watch them grow. They'll learn much more than I ever knew. And I think to myself, what a wonderful world. Yes, I think to myself, what a wonderful world. Ooh, yeah.
Hello again, hello. Just called to say hello. I couldn't sleep at all tonight, and I know it's late, but I couldn't wait. Hello, my friend, hello. Just called to let you know I think about you every night when I'm here alone and you're there at home. Hello. Maybe it's been crazy, and maybe I'm to blame, but I put my heart above my head. We've been through it all, and you love me just the same. When you're not there, I just need to hear hello, my friend, hello. It's good to meet you so. It's good to love you like I do, and to feel this way when I hear you say hello. Hello, my friend, hello. Just called to let you know I think about you every night, and I know it's late, but I couldn't wait. Hello.
she asks if you're all alone, can she take you home? You must tell her no. And don't forget who's taking you home and in whose arms you're gonna be. Oh, darling, save the last dance for me. And don't forget who's taking you home and in whose arms you're gonna be. Oh, darling, save the last dance for me.
I hope you all enjoyed those memories and found moments of your own time with Dad in amongst them. We're about to have a little bit of live music now, so I'd like to invite up Andrea, Josh and Erin, please.
Hello, I'm Josh's wife, Josh being one of Jim's grandchildren. First, I got to see some lovely photos of Josh I'd never seen before just then. So. It's not very fair. I got to sing after watching that. This was a song requested by the family, Warren and Jeff particularly. But we decided to change some of the words so that it would be more Jim. We hope you enjoy. And I'll do my best to find somebody's forehead to stare at and not cry. Almost heaven, sandy beaches, rolling breakers, long and winding rivers. Life is old there, older than the trees, younger than the mountains, blowing in the breeze. Country road, take me home to the place I belong. Southern coastline, I'll be just fine. Take me home, country roads. All my memories gather round her, desert dreaming to blue water, dark and dusty, endless painted sky. In the moonlight, teardrop in my eye. Country roads, take me home to the place I belong. Southern coastline, doing just fine. Take me home down country roads. I hear a voice in the morning hour. She calls me. Radio reminds me of my home far away. And driving down the road, I get a feeling I should have been home yesterday. yesterday. Country roads will take me home to the place I belong. Old southern coastline, doing just fine. Take me home down country roads, take me home to the place I belong. Southern coastline, doing just fine. Take me home down country roads, 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 take me home down country roads.
In the run sheet, I told them they had to stay there. Or in the run sheet, I said they had to stay there, so that's why they're still standing there. Because we're nearly at the end of today. You'll notice the table over on the side here is filled with things that, as a family, reminded us a lot of Dad and gave us special memories. So if you get a chance later on, you might want to take a bit of a look at another part of our memories. That was beautiful, guys. Thank you very much for playing for us. I'd like to thank Andrew from the Mornington Peninsula Funeral Services for helping our family out through this process, the Safety Beach Yacht Club and Snooks Catering for their services today, and we hope you'll enjoy their catering in the next little moment. After my final words, we ask you to stay for some refreshments and to share memories with us. As Dad isn't here to hold the purse strings, Mum has made it an open bar, and there's going to be plenty of food. I'd like us all just to, I know we've watched the things and we've listened to the song, but I would like us to just take a moment of silence to reflect on what Jim meant in your life, or to say a little prayer, or whatever your belief structure is. Maybe to think about something that he's added to you or given to you. So let's just take a moment to reflect on Jim. Jim and Helen were a true partnership. Both had to compromise for each other and their families. They had a love that endured for almost 7 decades. Mum was fierce in her care for Dad, right up to the final moments of his life. As you have heard, Dad was a proud man, possibly vain. In the last days, things were getting difficult. Dad required lifting and a more intimate level of care. Mum asked Kathy and I to shave Dad. We were reluctant. Mum wanted Dad to have his teeth in. Kathy and I felt it was unnecessary and uncomfortable for Dad. Mum wanted Dad dressed in his chair for when people visited. Kathy and I tried to persuade her to leave him in the bed. He was only waking up for very short moments. The next morning, Jeff had shaved Dad. He was a little more alert. Dad, not Jeff. We got Dad to his chair and he had his teeth in. I commented to Dad, "You look good, Dad, all freshly shaved." In a whispery, slow voice, he said, "I feel better. It's important." Mum was right. She knew what was important to Dad, what made him feel better. He was able to spend the final days, as he had throughout his life, with grace and dignity. Thank you. You'd like to make your way to the back for some refreshments. And drinks are over here, please.